Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. I'm here with a replay of Modern Friendly League, but I wanted to show you guys the deck list that I used in the league before I got started. My list has been pretty stock for a long time, just 4 of all the Merfolk. I had 1 Vapor Snag, 1 Dismember, and 1 Echoing Truth as kind of a flexible package. But I wanted in this league to test out a couple of Smuggler's Copters. There's been an increasing amount of discussion about this card on the subreddit recently. I know people have been talking about it for a while, pretty much since, I guess, Kaladesh, when the card came out. But I haven't personally tested it yet, and the recent discussion really piqued my interest, so I wanted to give it a shot. So in order to make room for the 2 Smuggler's Copters, I cut 1 Master of Waves, and I cut the Singleton Vapor Snag, leaving 1 Dismember and 1 Echoing Truth in the main deck. I opted to keep the Echoing Truth in the main deck just because it's such a versatile answer. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Then in the sideboard, I had been running 3 Pithing Needles, but it just felt a little bit too cute. One of the main reasons for playing it is for the Devoted Druid combo. But you'll play the Needle, and then they'll just chord for a Reclamation Sage or something, or they'll play a Kazali Pride Mage and just sacrifice him and destroy your Pithing Needle, and then they'll get infinite mana and win. It just didn't seem that strong. So I had also been running 3 Ceremonious Rejections. I love this card, so I bumped it back up to 4. It's our best defense, it's my best defense against Affinity in my sideboard, and it's amazing against Eldrazi Tron and regular Tron. Ugin is one of the cards that can just destroy us more easily than any other card, and Ceremonious Rejection is probably the best answer to Ugin in the format. Replacing the other 2 Pithing Needles, I'm just playing Dismembers number 2 and 3. If we're worried about Devoted Druid, why not just kill that guy right away? We're not often really too concerned about our life total against them. If we can get any kind of board state without them comboing off, we usually win. So keeping them off of Devoted Druid with Dismembers seems like a good strategy to me. So yeah, that's my list. The lands are the same, most of the creatures are the same, just cut 1 Master of Waves, cut 1 Vapor Snag, and I'm going to try to run 1 Smuggler's Copter. I guess a quick note on why I decided to trim 1 Master of Waves is that this guy's been getting a little bit weaker since Fatal Push has entered the format. Fatal Push is just played in every deck that has black, and there's a lot of those decks. And having our Master of Waves answered by a 1-mana removal spell is pretty rough. It's not the end of the world. It's still good to have a bunch of these guys in the deck, and we often want to see this guy more than any other card off the top of the deck. But we're also a pretty low-curve deck that wants to win fast. And with this guy becoming increasingly weak to Fatal Push, I felt like it was a decent time to trim one of these guys. Lower the curve a tiny bit, and just decrease the risk of getting blown out, a big tempo blowout, by having our 4-drop answered by a 1-drop removal spell. Alright, so all that said, you guys might want to look away for a second. I'm going to go to my replay screen, and it's going to show the results. So if you don't want to see it, look away now. Keep looking away. I've been avoiding putting timestamps, clicking through to this stuff. All right, you guys can look now, but just because I didn't want to put in the effort. So I don't know if I'm going to. It might be easier just to say, all right, click here and skip looking away. Anyhow, let's get started. This is the first round of the Modern Friendly. It's an interesting opening hand. We drew one of our 3 Master of Waves. I really enjoy multiple Spreading Seas opening hands. We're on the draw, so it's a little bit slow. I've got my Singleton Kira, which is a very strong card in a lot of matchups. So I think this looks like a keep to me, even though it's an awkward keep. Opponent mulligan to 6, mulligan to 5, starting to feel a little bit better about this keep. Mulligan to 4, ouch. Let's see what he did with his scry. Man, so he mulliganed to 4 and put his scry on the bottom of the library, it looked like. Adjust that a little bit. Yeah, that's how it looks. So, opponent's on the play, and it is Affinity. So, just hoping they don't have the nut 4 card hand here. Okay, Vault Scourge is pretty good. I drew a Master of the Pearl Trident, which is nice because the hand was a little bit clunky, and Spreading Seas are not really amazing against Affinity. We'd much rather play a creature on turn 2. So we really just want to dodge Cranial Plating now. So the opponent opens with Ornithopter, 1 card left in hand. Really hoping for no Cranial Plating, and it looks like he has another Vault Scourge. So at this point, empty-handed, the opponent's just going to be chipping in for one or 2 points of damage, trying to gain some life. And unless they top deck Cranial Plating, we should be kind of in the clear. So here I'm just going to take 1 from the Vault Scourge. Sometimes it takes a long time to click through on these replays. I'm not quite sure why that works that way. But my turn I drew a 3rd Spreading Seas, but we've got plays anyway, so not really a big deal what I drew that turn. Keeping Kira was a good idea in this matchup because we're going to be able to establish a flying blocker. It's pretty nice. So opponent just activating Blinkmoth Nexus, doing the best that they can, it looks like. Getting in for 3, nothing we can do against the Flyers. They gain 2 life going up to 21. So swing for 2, and then for my turn, I think it's probably going to be Kira, right? So island into Kira with the expectation that we're going to follow up with Master of Waves. All right, opponent just passing now, not choosing not to get in with his Flyers anymore since they would probably just die. You know, I don't really like attacks this turn either. I don't really want to trade either of my creatures for the pair of Vault Scourges. We're kind of holding it down right now, and we've got a huge attack next turn. Okay, so Steel Overseer is probably their slowest big threat. Does nothing the turn it comes down, and then just adds a +1 to his creatures on the second turn. We have outs to this. You can draw an Echoing Truth to bounce his Vault Scourges. You can draw a Dismember to just kill this guy, and it looks like he just has an Ornithopter in hand. It makes sense to play it out so he can add counters to it next turn and attack. Really not too much pressure. At this point, they've only got 3 power on the board across 3 bodies, and we've got a whole lot more than that. So for my turn, I drew a land. So might as well play at least one of these Spreading Seas. See if I can't draw another Lord or something like that. Another land. So we'll activate Mutavault. And at this point, let's count up our power. We've got 10 with these guys. 5, that's 15, plus 6 is 21 total. And how could they block? If we attacked with everybody, they could if they double blocked the Lord to try to kill him, let's see, they would still be taking 19, right? So it's 15 plus 6, yeah, it's 21. So if they wanted to double block, they would still need to throw away the other 3rd creature to prevent themselves from just losing. If they chumped a Mutavault, I'm sorry, no, we have to factor in the life gain from the Vault Scourge. So if they double block the Master, they'd go up to 21, and they'd take 19. So they could live, kill the Lord. They just can't live too long against these elementals anyway, so it seems like an excellent time to just Alpha Strike. If the opponent chooses to block, they're going to be chumping. And if they choose to double block and take out our Lord, they're going to take a massive amount of damage and be left with just a Steel Overseer and a couple of little guys. I forgot to specify that I dropped the Spreading Seas on the Blinkmoth Nexus just to take him off of another potential artifact attacker that Steel Overseer could make bigger. Of course, they could just chump with Ornithopters too to try to tread water a little bit. But it's looking like if they don't die from lethal this turn, they would almost certainly die next turn. Another thing to consider is if they double block the Master of Waves to try to take care of all the elementals. Let's see, they'd throw the 2 Vault Scourges. Again, they go up to 21 at damage. Assuming they don't block anything with Steel Overseer, I think they'd be taking 18. So they'd end up at 3 life. They would lose probably their 2 Vault Scourges. End up at 3 life. We've got a Flyer with 2. We'd still have a Lord and 2 Mutavaults. So a ton of pressure. Even if they double block Master of Waves, taking off the 10 power with the elementals. It doesn't really change the math on this Alpha Strike too much. The opponent thought about it for a little while, and ultimately decided that blocking wasn't worth it, decided that he had had enough, and we went to game 2. So again, look away for a second if you don't want to see the match result, clicking out now. Alright, I'm back with the second game of the first round against Affinity. We were fortunate enough to have the opponent mulligan to 4 in what is obviously one of our hardest matchups. This is a pretty sketchy opening hand, but we are on the draw. Going to have some time to draw into more Merfolk so we can play Silvergill Adept. We've got removal if they play anything that needs to get removed. Ceremonious Rejection to counter their big spells. So for me, this was a keep. As I said, it's pretty sketchy. I mean, you've got a Mutavault. He can block in Etch Champion, but we really, really need to draw good stuff from here on out. The opponent kept on 7. That's usually a scary sign against Affinity, especially with them on the play. They can be so fast. So Ornithopter, Memnite, Mox Opal. They have Metalcraft online now. Cranial Plating. So Cranial Plating would have been a great target if he didn't have the Mox Opal. Like next turn, could play the land, pass the turn, and then just ceremoniously rejected the Cranial Plating. But at this point, it's on the table, and we're not going to have too many answers to it. Right, tapping the Inkmoth, equipping the Cranial Plating, playing a Signal Pest. That's pretty aggressive. So this is pretty feel bad here, but he's swinging for 5, and we can pay 4 for the Dismember to just kill the Ornithopter, but using a Dismember to kill an Ornithopter feels so bad. Not a great start. And we didn't draw a Merfolk, so that means we can't play Silvergill Adept here. I can play another land and hold up Ceremonious Rejection and Dismember to again take the opponent off of his Cranial Plating attack. It's kind of bad because he doesn't have enough mana to activate Inkmoth and attach Cranial Plating, which I feel like would be a pretty attractive option to get in with Infect, because I would love to Dismember the Inkmoth Nexus, but currently doesn't have enough mana for that line. And I think he missed his land drop last turn, so... Okay, plays a Vault Scourge. Looks like he's missing his land drop again, so I'm not going to get to Dismember the Inkmoth Nexus. Also not going to get to Dismember the Vault Scourge, which kind of stinks because it's the one with lifelink. I have to make some kind of efficient use of our mana. There's nothing to counter this turn with Ceremonious Rejection. Well, there's a Mox Opal. I thought about countering it, but in the end, he still has a Mox Opal on the board, so it's not changing the math on Cranial Plating, making his creatures bigger. So I just let it resolve. I mean, this game is not looking too good, but as I mentioned, I did take a while thinking about that. So the opponent did resolve Mox Opal. They could have chosen not to play Vault Scourge, activate Inkmoth, play the second Mox Opal, and then attach Cranial Plating to the Inkmoth, but opponent comfortable enough to just get in with 0 drops here. Alright, Signal Pest. Trying to buff the Memnite, but we'll just Dismember him and pass the turn. Okay, so the opponent with his mana is going to equip Cranial Plating now to the Vault Scourge. Pretty good move. We've got one more Dismember in the deck. Drew into another Ceremonious Rejection, but still can't play out a creature. The sketchy keep. We drew into a Dismember and a Ceremonious Rejection. Didn't hit any gas, and it's just not really turning out very well here. And I realized that Ceremonious Rejection can't hit every single card in Affinity here. It couldn't counter the Vault Scourge because this guy is actually a black spell with black Phyrexian mana. And obviously Master of Ethereum is a blue spell. So Ceremonious Rejection only counters colorless spells. So I've tended to think about Affinity as sort of the prototypical colorless deck, but really Eldrazi Tron is much more colorless, right? I don't think they have any colored spells at all in their deck typically. But these guys do. They have blue spells and black spells, and sometimes red spells, I guess, with like Whip Flare and things like that. So these Ceremonious Rejections just getting laughed at here, and just getting our face beaten in. So really, really rough game 2. We'll go to game 3 and see how the final game panned out. You guys might want to look away for a second. I'm going to click now. All right, back with the third and final game. I'm definitely going to be on the play. Let's see how the opening hand looks. Well, this is much, much better. 2 Aether Vials is a bit much. We'd rather have another card than the second Aether Vial, but if we draw something like, well, not something like, but exactly the Copter, Smuggler's Copter, we could potentially loot this away. But it's definitely a keep. We've got a 1-drop creature, 2-drop creature. We can reject one of their big spells. Snap keep for me, and the opponent went down to 6. Let's check out what he did with his Scry. Okay, he put the card on top, so he liked it. We're going to play an Island and Aether Vial, pass the turn. Plague Moth, Ornithopter, hopefully not as explosive as last turn. We'd love to use the Ceremonious Rejection. Okay, Vault Scourge is not that threatening. We're really looking to counter something like an Arcbound Ravager or specifically really Cranial Plating. Aether Vial goes up to 1. Now obviously we could play out a creature, Silvergill Adept usually here, but we've got the mana, so we might as well leave it up. So I think a better play is just to run out Aether Vial, kind of represent a slightly weak hand, maybe, and see what the opponent has on his turn. So there's the Cranial Plating. We have the Ceremonious Rejection. It's an excellent position for us on the play. We have a bit of tempo advantage, and then leave up mana to counter the Cranial Plating. Okay, another Springleaf Drum. That would have been decent with Cranial Plating, adding to the artifact count, but without it, it's pretty poor. Opponent going to get in for 1 lifelink with the Vault Scourge, and I'll just bring in the Cursecatcher now. Can't block, but looks like the opponent's done at this point. I'll take both of the Aether Vials up, and you know we're gonna really need to draw some more cards, some more spells, some more creatures. But at this point, we're feeling pretty good. And drawing that second Harbinger was exactly what I wanted to do. I'm gonna with 2 mana here. I think I'll play this Harbinger out now and get the Vault Scourge off the table with my mana, and leave up this Aether Vial. If there's anything that I want to bounce next turn, we can activate the Aether Vial and bring in the second Harbinger. Say he top decks a Cranial Plating and straps it onto something, we can just bounce that creature. If the opponent doesn't have anything too threatening that we don't want to bounce, we can just, of course, bring in the Silvergill and draw a card. Okay, get in for 1 with the Cursecatcher. Opponent goes back down to 18 after gaining 1 from lifelink. Gonna bounce his Vault Scourge and pass the turn with Aether Vials up. Okay, opponent immediately plays his Vault Scourge again, taps it with Springleaf Drum to activate Blinkmoth Nexus. Now this is interesting. We can go after attacks to the end step and bounce one of his lands. He won't be able to replay it because it'll still be a creature in the end step. When we have priority, we can set him back a land drop. But to me, it seems like we'd probably rather bounce his Vault Scourge because lifelink can be so annoying. So I'm just going to take 1 from this Blinkmoth Nexus. We're down to 18. And at the end step, as I mentioned, gave it some thought and decided to get this Vault Scourge off the table with my Harbinger. Okay, so our attacking force is growing. Going to advance both Aether Vials. Mutavault's not terrible. It's a body. Let's go ahead and bring in Silvergill now. And draw a card. So Lord of Atlantis is pretty awesome here. It's worth noting that it was a little bit scary for me to play out all my creatures because with only 1 Lord on the table, we're really, really weak to Whip Flare. The opponent would have enough mana to pay for Cursecatcher's tax effect. But at this point, with the opponent on 3 cards, one of which we know for a fact is Vault Scourge, we should be playing around what's probably maybe like a 2 of in their deck at most, and really just go for the win. So if I play out the Lord in this spot, we're going to be able to attack for 8 this turn. So obviously a 2-turn clock with Overkill. And at that point, the opponent scooped. They mulliganed to 6, but they did have the turn 2 cranial plating that we were able to counter with Ceremonious Rejection. So for those of you guys who haven't tried out Ceremonious Rejection yet, I've found it to be pretty solid in this matchup. We have... well, I think that it just kind of does a really good job as a 4-of in our sideboard because there's a ton of affinity in the metagame right now. I think it's number 1 or number 2 in the format right now, and there's just been a ton of Eldrazi Tron, and there's also a ton of regular Tron decks. What was I going to say? The main card that used to compete, I guess, for Ceremonious Rejection spots were Hurkyl's Recalls. And that card just really doesn't do anything against a lot of other decks. It does decently well against Lantern Control, but Ceremonious Rejection is probably much better in that matchup also. So yeah, give it a try if you haven't already. Please let me know your thoughts on how the match went, on the matchup with Affinity in general, and if you have any other sideboard tech. I know a lot of you guys run Gut Shots, but I'm not a big fan of that particular spell. Don't need to get into it too much right now. This league is supposed to be testing Smuggler's Copter, but I didn't draw it, as you saw, in any of the 3 games here. Let's see if I get to test it out some in the second round. Please subscribe if you haven't already, leave any comments you might have, and I'll catch you in the second round. Bye, guys.